welcome back to my channel. My name is Becca if you're new here, and I'm very excited because I am finally going over my birth story and pregnancy with my first child. She's now over 2 years old. This is just something that I've always wanted to share, but it never really felt like the right time. I am just gonna do it now because expecting another one in January, so I figured now is a great time. So this is gonna be a long video because it covers my pregnancy, the actual delivery, and then a little bit of postpartum. I'm going to try to condense it down, but there's just so much detail and I just love birth so much, so I'm just gonna jump right in. When I first got pregnant with him, I made a joke at the time that he was my most expensive fertility test because we had been married for 4 years and I'd been on birth control for 3 of those years, and then the whole last year I wasn't on anything, and I kind of expected something to happen, but we weren't trying, but we weren't like not trying to try. Anyways, it was really weird, and I really was getting scared that I was gonna have fertility issues. So I told Billy, my husband, I was like, okay, we're gonna try this month, and if it doesn't happen, I'm gonna call up a doctor or something because there's something wrong. So in my head, I was so freaked out. That's the month that we got pregnant. I found out because of a missed period. That was my very first symptom. The only other symptoms that I had really sore boobs. I never had morning sickness or any kind of nausea. And another really random symptom that I had was I was so gassy, painfully so. And it was just like really trapped. I had never heard of that one. So if you're pregnant and going through that, I'm sorry. So when I was pregnant, I was still living in the US. We now live in New Zealand, which is very exciting. We went to one appointment and the ultrasound, and we got the bills for them, and they were $2,000. And we were both completely shocked. I was on insurance, so we got that all worked out and sorted. He actually ended up being totally free because we got unmedicated, which was amazing. I'm just so glad to be pregnant in New Zealand this time because I'm just excited to see the difference between the two pregnancies and births and free healthcare. One of my favorite memories is the first ultrasound. It's just such a surreal feeling, actually getting to see your baby for the first time. I completely tell myself that there is no baby in there, it's not alive, and so to actually see it like moving and to see the little heart beating, it's just the best feeling in the world. I didn't really have that many cravings. It was really strange. I really wanted meals from my childhood, my mom's cooking for example. I really wanted a lot of fruit, and that's kind of it. Like, I didn't have crazy cravings or anything. Honestly, I forgot I was pregnant most of the time. It was a very easy going first trimester. I had a little bit of low energy, but that was it. So moving on to the second trimester, I kept pretty active with walking a bunch and just yoga and some light pregnancy workouts that I found on YouTube. The trimester passed really fast. By week 18, I definitely had a bump, finally. By week 19, I could feel the baby move, which is just the best feeling ever. By week 20, Billy could feel the baby moving. So moving right along to the third trimester, the only things that I have written down from that time is by week 30, he was hiccuping and moving so much. It was really fun, and I just loved that period in pregnancy because I feel like you bond so much with your baby because you just feel them so much, and like I would talk to him a bunch, and it was just really sweet. A few other notes. I did kind of a loose hypnobirthing approach to it all. So I read Ina May Gaskin's book to childbearing. I did all of the free stuff that was offered with hypnobirthing. I didn't pay for any kind of classes or anything, so I like found the book at the library, I'm pretty sure. I would do the meditations, but I would not say that it was like a full hypnobirthing baby experience during the birth. Another fun thing about this whole pregnancy was that we did not find out the gender, and I was really excited to do it like the old-fashioned way and not find out. And also I really wanted to spite my mother because she wanted me to find out so bad, and I was like, no. Another weird thing about my pregnancy was I was measuring really small. They actually sent me to a couple extra ultrasounds because they were worried about intrauterine growth restriction. He was measuring the correct height every single time, so it wasn't actually anything. I don't know why, but I carried really small. Like, I only gained 20 pounds my whole pregnancy. I never had to buy any maternity clothes. It was really nice. This is definitely a symptom of pregnancy, but I was having like the craziest dreams, like so vivid. Every single one of them was like I would have this magical and perfect delivery, and then 3 days in my dream would go by and it'd be like, where's my baby? Who's been feeding him this whole time? I think that was manifesting my nervousness because I was so looking forward to delivery, and like I've been obsessed with having babies and the whole delivery process for so long. I was so nervous to actually take care of another human being. So another thing that I did and really loved is I used rosehip oil on my belly and my boobs because they're just so itchy, first of all, and second of all, I didn't get any stretch marks, but I think that's more genetic than anything, but it helps with the itchiness and it might help with stretch marks. I don't know, but I'm definitely gonna do it again this time. You do start getting very stretched out feeling and uncomfortable, and by 36 weeks I was like, okay, let's get the show on the road. I was trying everything to get into labor. I was like curb stomping, eating all the dates and the teas days and stuff. I tried manifesting him out, like I would pick a certain date and think so hard that he was coming on that day. It didn't work, but I tried. Overall, it was a fantastic pregnancy and I look back on it so fondly. One other big note about that time was that it was when COVID first was coming out. So I was halfway through my pregnancy when it like first broke worldwide. You know, at first it wasn't a big deal, but then it started spreading like crazy and I quit my job because I was scared of getting it. It just got really terrifying and very real because nobody knew yet like how it affected babies or pregnant moms. We had a big scare because we were living in New York at the time with whether my husband would be able to be in the delivery room with me, which is my worst nightmare. Luckily it ended up being fine. Again, sorry I'm going through this so fast. I'm trying not to have an hour-long video. I am 3 days past my due date and just trying so hard to get the baby out of me. At 10:30 that night, we were watching Juno, which is just the most random video that we could have ever been watching. But I started to feel contractions and I tried not to get super excited because I know that sometimes these things can take a very, very long time. So after the movie was over, my priority was going to bed and trying to get as much rest and sleep as possible. I was able to sleep kind of on and off throughout that night, but I didn't even get half a full night's rest because it wasn't even that the contractions were super painful. It just made me so aware so I could never fall asleep and get a really good rest. Eventually I just got up and gave up. So the next day I labored that entire day. The contractions at this point were 2 and 5 minutes apart, which is like one of the signs that you should go in, but I knew I was nowhere close to being ready. First of all, like the whole morning they weren't even that painful. I could talk through them all, tried everything that I knew possible, lots of long walks and yoga, get things progressing faster. Nothing really happened until about halfway through the day. I could tell that they were starting to get a little bit more painful, but they were still like I could still talk through them. The whole day passes and it's starting to turn into nighttime again. I was just getting so frustrated. I didn't know what to do, and so I called up my midwife. I explained the whole situation to her and she was like, yeah, I don't think you're ready to come in yet. She suggested that I take a warm bath and drink a glass of red wine and try to get some sleep, and I was like, so I took a hot bath. I did not drink red wine. It actually did space out my contractions, but it also made them so much more painful. They were every 5 minutes, but they hurt so much more. After the bath, I got out and I tried to lay in bed. Eventually, at 1:30 a.m., I gave up because I didn't realize it quite at the time, but I was having really bad back labor, which is just the worst. Anytime you sit down, or especially if you lay down, it just brings on this really strong, painful contraction. It made it really, really hard because all you want to do is lay down and be comfortable. If I could have done that, I would have been so fine because the pain level wasn't that bad, but I couldn't rest and I couldn't sit down. Every contraction seizing up in these horrible, painful contortions. And I look over and I see my husband peacefully sleeping there. And I'm like, I can't do this anymore. It is dark. I'm alone. I need some help. So at that point, I wake him up and I'm like, I'm gonna call the midwife again. So I called her and she's like, yeah, I really don't want you to go like 2 nights without sleep. So come on in and we'll see where you're at. We drove in. It was only a 15-minute drive to the birth center. She checked me and I was at 3 centimeters, which is enough to be admitted. We both knew that I wasn't as far along as I would have liked. It was just so nice to feel I was in the hands of somebody that knew what they were doing. So I asked what the options were. She was like, well, you can try to do these exercises and try to like work the baby down, or you can get a shot of morphine and Phenergan that will help stall out your contractions and you can rest. I at the time was like, well, I want to do this all natural, and so I'm gonna try my best to work this baby out as fast as possible. I'm walking around, I'm doing all these exercises, even though I had been doing all of these things all day long. I was like, I'm gonna do it. But I was literally walking around the room, falling asleep while standing up, and I was like, okay, no, this is stupid. I called them in and these lovely nurses came in and they stabbed these needles into both my thighs at the same time. It was so amazing. Slept for 4 hours and I felt like I could conquer the world after that. I would 100% do it again. It made all of the difference. But after my 4 hours of sleeping, it was 9:30 in the morning and I was 4 centimeters dilated. So I labored that entire day. I couldn't lay down or sit down, again, because of the terrible back labor that I was dealing with. Camera died. Okay, so they had me hooked up to monitors and they realized that I was having coupled contractions. I couldn't lay or sit down or really rest, and so I would just circle the room. I had the bed really lifted, and so one of the positions that I really liked, I would just lean over the bed during the contractions, or I would walk over to the counter and just kind of like rest on that. I also could sit on the birthing ball with my legs really wide apart. That was really nice because I could lean around and hug Billy and he could do the same to me and apply pressure to my back, which felt really good. By 1:15 p.m. I am 7 centimeters dilated. I would have loved to be in the bath that they had offered at the beginning, but due to COVID rules, it wasn't allowed. This is the point where you like start to officially go into transition. It's definitely the hardest part, but it's kind of the best because it's when you know that you're at the end. The sucky part is that you don't know that you're quite at the end. This whole time, I was really able to control a lot of the pain by breathing through the contractions. I think that that is the number one thing that I could ever tell anybody to learn while they are pregnant, is to learn how to breathe. It helps so much. It wasn't until about 9 centimeters that I would say that I started to really lose control of it. But one of the greatest feelings at 7 centimeters, they came in and started prepping the room for delivery. It was just so nice to be able to see the like forward progression of it all. At this point, I was mostly either on the ball or in the shower. Billy would hold the hot water on my back and it felt really good. I am usually a pretty conservative and modest kind of person. I was definitely just wearing a little black bra and absolutely nothing else, and it doesn't matter. You do not care who sees what. I am 9 centimeters dilated. I feel like I started having people tell me things that were contrary to what I was feeling and noticing in my own body. I'm clearly in transition and my body actually starts pushing for me. I was not physically trying to push. It was just doing it automatically. So the midwife comes in and she texts me again and I'm still at a 9, which I felt like I had been at a 9 forever. It had probably only been like 20 minutes since she had last checked me and I was at a 9. She left again. I told the nurse like I'm still pushing and she's like, oh no, don't push. You're gonna tear horribly. I feel like she didn't really like believe that I was pushing anyways. I don't know. I just felt very blown off. And at this point, I'm in the shower and these contractions were so incredibly strong and painful that I was grabbing onto the handlebars and lifting myself up off of the ground. They were just so powerful. The whole time now I'm saying out loud even like I shouldn't be pushing, don't push, you're gonna hurt yourself. Poor Billy is just sitting back there like trying to pour hot water on my back, trying to make me feel better. I wish I had the midwife or the nurse tell me like, oh wow, you're kind of getting close to the end, but no, it was kind of the opposite, like, oh, I think you're making a big deal out of nothing. And I feel like I had managed my pain so well for the rest of it. It really wasn't that bad up until about like 9 centimeters. Anyway, so the midwife comes in again. I was like, is there anything that we can do to make this faster? What if we break my water? Because I've heard that that makes it go faster. And she's like, oh no, I don't really believe in interventions. And I was like, okay, well, what can we do? Because I cannot do this for much longer. Which looking at it now, it's like, I didn't have much longer. Well, the only other options are a spinal tap or an epidural. And I was like, well, can you give me an estimate of how much longer you think this will take? She's like, no, I'm not going to do that because I'm really bad at giving estimates and I don't want to give you any kind of false hope. And so I was like, well, okay, let's call the anesthesiologist because I cannot do this for much longer. At this point, I had climbed into the bed, draped over the back of the bed, and my knees were just sitting on the flat part. And that's actually the position I delivered in, so I didn't move after I got into that. And again, I'm just wearing a black bra. Like my everything is out and very open for the whole world to see. So this little anesthesiologist dude comes in, he's like, oh, let me turn around and give you some privacy. And so I'm pretty sure a nurse like draped something on me. Gives zero cares about who sees what at this point. He turns around and then I'm having like another contraction. He's like, oh, let me leave the room and give you some privacy. This is never gonna happen. But he comes back in and he's sitting there giving me the whole spiel about what the epidural should do and the side effects and the risks and all this stuff. I have 2 other contractions while he's talking to me. I cannot pay attention to a single word he is saying. There's just so much going on in my head and body. During the second contraction of him talking, I felt the most beautiful feeling in the entire world. Sharp, painful stab in my vagina. I was like, well, I'm not going to tell the nurse because she didn't believe me the last time I told her what was happening. The next contraction, if I feel that feeling again, then I will say it to the room. During the next contraction, wouldn't you know it, my water didn't pop, and it was just the best because again, that forward progression is just all that you want at this point. The midwife checked and she was like, oh yep, there's a baby right there. So we said goodbye to the anesthesiologist because he was no longer needed. I found out later that she had told the anesthesiologist when he came in that she thought that it would be another 3 hours. If she had told me that, I would have just broken. And also it was so untrue. I don't know. My water had broken, but I didn't realize at the time it had only broken just a little bit. So I guess just a part of it had popped and drained, and his head probably blocked off the rest of it, I'm assuming. A couple of things that really helped me is I had really bad back labor, and so counter pressure was necessary. Billy was very good at providing that counter pressure, and a lot of the times he would see me going into a contraction and would just give it to me. The few times that he didn't, I would be like kind of angry at him and be like, why are you not giving me counter pressure right now? It provided so much relief. The other thing that really helped is learning how to properly breathe. I'm pretty sure it's in the Ina May Gaskin book. One of the things is to learn how to breathe out while you're pooping, which sounds really weird, but it's one of those things that really, really helps actually. Like, you should never ever be holding your breath while you're pushing. I did that a couple of times when I was pushing, and it just makes it so much more painful, and it is so much less efficient. 100% is like my number one advice to anybody is start practicing breathing while you're pushing. So now at this point, I am fully complete. The midwife can see the top of the baby's head. It's getting pretty wild. I loved the glorious pressure of the baby's head in my vagina because, again, it's just like, wow, this is happening. We are right at the end. It is so close. Two things that really helped me during the actual pushing part. First of all, I was in that position draped over the bed. One thing is that my midwife like grabbed my hips and pulled me back. I could just feel so much space open up. I love her for that. The other thing is that my midwife said to me at that time was not to run away or be scared of the intense feeling. And I think that that so helped me because that was my natural instinct, was to try to run away from it. But she said that and I was like, no. We have to do it. And so it really helped me get into the right mental headspace. It's just the craziest thing because I would say that I never actually pushed during any of the contractions. Of course, I never pushed in between the contractions because that's just not efficient at all. Don't do that. But the rest of the time, it was just my body completely like taking over and pushing for me. It's so insane. After my water had popped, I had, I think, 3 more contractions and like pushes before things started really happening. It was the most intense pain that I've ever felt in my life. My body had this really strong, powerful contraction and a really strong, solid push. It was like a ripping pain. I thought I had ripped from the front end all the way to the back end. It was awful. I'm not a screamer. I wildly screamed in that moment because it was so incredibly painful. And so after it happened, I was like, what the freak just happened? And so I like tried to take stock of what was going on, and I noticed that my water had truly popped. There was so much water gushing out of me. Okay, was that what that was? Because that was kind of intense. As that had happened, the pain was so intense that I slammed my legs together. Everybody in the room was like, no, put your legs apart. My midwife like pried my legs apart and she was like, the baby's head is out. Oh my gosh, it's so crazy. Because that, I knew, was the hardest part of the whole process, and I had just done it and it was over. With the next contraction, the rest of his little body came right out of me, and it was so easy compared to the head. You go from the most intense pain you've ever felt in your entire life to feeling so good. I just remember saying over and over, it was like a broken record. I couldn't think of anything else to say. I feel so good right now. The midwife caught the baby and handed him to me through my legs. I did this horrible thing where I grabbed him and I didn't care about anything else. I slid forward on my knees, which when you deliver in this position, all your stuff just lands on the bed. I think in most other positions they can like kind of funnel it off. Anyways, I slid forward through this pool of bloody juices, and then I flipped around and just like sat and laid in it. I just stared at my baby that was now in my arms, and I cared nothing about anything because, again, I just felt so good, so happy and relieved, and it was just so amazing to see my baby. At this point, we finally looked down and found out the gender, and it was a boy. Not a surprise because he is now 2 years old. And it's so funny because at the time you don't register it in your brain. Like, I was like, oh, it's a boy, but you don't care. He is there, and it doesn't matter what gender their baby is at that point. I had no worded thoughts. Like, I just had so many strong emotions. I instantly bonded with him, and it was just such a surreal, raw, and tender moment to just realize that this is the person that's been inside of you this whole time. Now they are here and they're your baby, and you just love them so much, and it's such an amazing feeling. By far one of the most raw and powerful moments of my entire life. We just sat there and bonded for several long minutes. We waited for the cord to stop pulsing, and then Billy cut it. And it was nutso because the nurse like plopped him onto my chest and he wiggled his way over to my breast and started breastfeeding. I was just completely amazed because I didn't know that they could do that. But then that beautiful moment is ruined. The midwives just started massaging my belly because you have to deliver the placenta, and it's just not very pleasant. You just don't want to be touched like that anymore. One of the contractions came, which is another weird thing. You still have contractions after having the baby. They're a lot more mild. The placenta came right out, and it was actually a really nice feeling. Just kind of slid right out of there. After that, I got stabbed in very tender and raw and ripped places with a needle to be numbed. Then I had to have a few stitches. You don't want to be touched, and yet you have to have these like painful things done to you. It's terrible, but necessary. I had a first-degree tear, and I had what's called skin marks, which is just a terrible name. I was starting to get really uncomfortable because I'd been sitting in a lot of really nasty stuff for a while. And so after quite a while, the nurse was like, oh, would you like me to weigh and measure him now? She took him, and I immediately just rolled right out of bed and started walking to the shower. The nurse was like, oh no, what are you doing? And I was like, I'm gonna go shower because I'm disgusting. Let me help you. And so she came into the shower and was like hosing me down. She wouldn't let me do anything. And she was like, oh, you had us really worried there for a little bit because you lost a lot of blood. And I was like, I just feel great. After getting cleaned up, the three of us just snuggled up in bed together, and it was one of the most precious moments of my life. All in all, it was a hard but magical process. Other than the couple of times that I said it was actually very painful, the rest of it was so manageable. I was kind of shocked. It really wasn't that bad. Maybe a couple of hours that were a little bit of loss of control and a little bit more painful. The head coming out in the ring of fire and feeling the tearing, not pleasant, not gonna lie. He was born at 5:36 p.m., 5 days past my due date, 7 pounds, 20 inches. One of the crazy things to me is that from like the first contractions that I started having to delivering was 36 hours, so it was quite a bit longer. Again, like most of it was not that bad at all. Moving on to postpartum. One of the craziest things to me, I didn't take any kind of pain reliever, not even a Tylenol. I could have used it, but it was just never offered to me, and so I never even thought about it. The hardest part to me was just how long you stay so raw. At the time, I thought healing was kind of a linear process. Do not expect that. It would frustrate me so much because one day I would be bleeding so much, and then the next day it would be substantially less, and I'd be like, oh, it's getting better. The next day would come again, and nope, there's just so much more blood again. I thought I would kind of be like back to normal after like a week maybe. I would honestly say that it takes months to getting back to feeling 100%. I remember, I think it was 3 days after I'd had him, and I went on a tiny walk. I got to a certain point in the walk, and I was like, no, this is not okay anymore. And it was just the most horrible feeling of your pelvic floor not being strong enough, and it just feels like your organs are trying to fall out of you, which is awful. I thought that I would never get to 100% again. It does heal and it does get better. Looking back on it now, I probably had a touch of postpartum anxiety as we were leaving the hospital, and this was like 2 days after he was born. I almost cried twice leaving the hospital because I was so scared of doing something so wrong that I would kill him, which is kind of absurd. When we got home from the hospital, I did start sobbing uncontrollably for several reasons. You're just a mess hormonal wise. I was also crying a bunch because I was looking at my 2-day-old and looking at pictures of him from the day before, and I just felt like time was passing so fast and that I wasn't able to absorb these moments, and it just really freaked me out and scared me. Another weird thing that I had never heard of before, I got this like wash of anxiety every time the sun went down for like a week after he was born. During the daytime with the sunshine, you feel like everything is accessible, and you feel like if you need it, you can call or seek help and it will be given to you. For some reason, my brain told me that at nighttime, everything is closed, I can't get anybody, and it felt like I was entering like a 12-hour stretch of just being completely on my own, which is not true. And what can I say? Your brain goes a little bit crazy. It's just such a physically and mentally raw time. Lucky for me, I have a very supportive husband, and it was great because I could just sit on the couch for like a week, focus on healing and breastfeeding, all of these good things, because he made all the food, washed and took care of all the cloth diapers, and he like really took good care of us, which I think is definitely necessary. Another thing with my postpartum experience, they mentioned it a couple times in the hospital that he had a tongue tie. They're not making a big deal of it, and I don't really like interventions. He was breastfeeding just fine, and so I'm like, I'm not going to do anything about it. But when I went to our pediatrician, she was like, I've been doing this for 40 years, and this is the worst tongue tie I've seen. If you don't get it clipped, you will have speech problems later. It's such an easy process to just go in and get it clipped. Breastfeeding was such a beautiful experience. I absolutely loved it. I fed him until he turned 2. There were only 2 times that I would say it got really hard. The first time was 3 days into the breastfeeding journey. Your milk comes in and your boobs just get so much bigger and harder. So he had a really hard time latching. There's only like one very specific position that I could get him latched in. I was freaking out. Oh my gosh, he's gonna starve to death. Luckily, the lactation consultant actually called. This is what's happening. It's normal and it goes away after 24 hours. it was such a relief because it was fine after that. I also feel really lucky because I feel like we never had what I would call a sleepless night. Even in the beginning, when he would wake up like 4 times a night, we exclusively breastfed, so I never gave him a bottle. We also bed shared, mostly due to the fact that we moved around every single month. It was actually so nice. Even if he woke up 4 times, I would breastfeed him. Within 10 minutes, we would all be back asleep again. It wasn't much sleep loss at all. But the last thing that I would say about my whole postpartum experience is just that I took exercising really slow. They give the blanket statement of 6 weeks is when it's okay to get back into a bunch of activity, but everything I was reading from like women's physios and stuff is actually more like 12 weeks. I definitely agree with that. I would go on walks and I would do some very gentle yoga, and I think I tried running once at like 7 weeks. My pelvic floor just felt terrible. Like it felt so weak, which makes sense because a giant child just ripped through it like 7 weeks ago. I waited until at least 12 weeks when I started doing a little more intense stuff like running or like more intense workouts. I would highly recommend not rushing back into things and just really listening to your body and being gentle and giving it the time that it needs to heal back. Otherwise, I think that's how you get a lot of really terrible problems later down the road. It's just really crazy how fast they grow. I'm telling this story now, but he is a 2-year-old. Like he's a full-on toddler running around. It's just so much fun watching them reach all these milestones and grow and their personalities come out. It's such a beautiful experience. I cannot recommend enough like taking so many photos and videos and just trying to preserve as many memories as you can, because it's cliche, but they grow up so freaking fast. Anyways, thank you so much for watching this. I hope it wasn't too crazy. It's a lot of story to tell. I know that I loved watching birth videos and vlogs so much when I was pregnant, even well before I was pregnant, because I was just obsessed with it. To be having my next one in January. We'll see how that one goes. But thank you so much for watching this video. If you are pregnant and about to deliver, I wish you all the best. I hope that it goes so well for you. Anyways, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next week. Bye.